Hello and welcome to the Thom and Joe Show. I'm Joe Stratman, and along with me is Tom Langley.
Hi.
Hi. Uh, this is a semi-new podcast we're doing. We talk about anime and music. Music's going to be next time. This time we're going to talk about anime, and this time we each pick an anime for each other to watch. And this time I picked The Skycrawlers, which is probably going to make this one of the least popular podcasts of all time. It's difficult to describe kind of how not interested people were in this movie. I looked at the stats, and some of them said it had a budget of 3 million and it made 5, so it did fine. But nobody talks about it, and nobody really, hey, Skycrawlers, that's my jam.
Yeah, I mean, in this sort of, obviously we're in the middle of because of the whole coronavirus. But when normality returns, you will go to most sort of places that sell anime DVDs, and you will find Skycrawlers for probably under £5. It's usually a lot of the major chain, the only chain that still does like large scale DVDs in the UK, which is HMV, regularly puts Skycrawlers on like their £3. So it's not a difficult film to get hold of, but it's not something that people necessarily go to as like, this is a really good serious thing to watch. It's been there for, this is now, what is this film, it's 2000s, isn't it? When is it, in 2000s?
2008.
Yeah, so it's about 12 years old. It's been around for a period, but I don't think it's ever really had the fandom of sort of some of the stuff we'll eventually come on to talk about.
Which is interesting because it has a lot of things fans like. The casting has some really actually well-known actors, and it's directed by Mamoru Oshiii, who did the Ghost in the Shell movies, and among a lot of other well-known things, Beautiful Dreamer, and he's just been a well-known figure in anime, and anything he does usually gets attention. This one didn't, and I have plenty of reasons for that. To put it in the most blunt way possible, there are the first user list that comes up on the IMDb is boring as hell. That's the list name.
What, with all of those extra O's?
Yes.
Ah.
I can't even count them.
There's a lot of O's.
Yeah, it is one of my favorites. I am not surprised it's nobody else's favorites.
Yeah. I've never seen this
but the
before.
first one we picked... Yeah. It's one of my favorites. You picked an artist movie, which is The Adolescence...
Adolescence of Utena, which you can go by...
Utena, yeah.
Which you can go and listen to... after you've listened to this, it will be on both the Bandcamp, and I will eventually get round to putting it on YouTube. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, hello YouTube people, welcome to wherever month this is going up in.
Yeah, hopefully April. But you picked an artist movie, so I come from a writer's background. Until adult ADHD ate my ability to write in a fashionable timeline. So this is very much a writer's movie. If you know Oshii's previous history, he kind of wrote and did and directed the Ghost in the Shell movies, and it is very much, the characters aren't speaking. He is quoting a lot of thick, difficult to decipher texts, and he is using that as his dialogue. Most infamously in Ghost in the Shell Innocence. There's a line where he puts in I can't remember what it is, but it's a poetic line for to replace a line which would be, "This isn't your jurisdiction," if you want to know how Ghost in the Shell Innocence works.
Yeah.
So in this case, he got a actual screenwriter, Chihiro Ito, and she has done a few things, which most of them live action. The only anime thing she did other than this that I can tell is she wrote the first episode of Eden of the East, which is another one that uses broken English. I mean, this is more fluid than most. They're treating it like it's fluid English, but both the first episode and the of Eden of the East and the Skycrawlers used the Japanese speakers speaking English fluently to, mixed results.
Yeah.
So that it's an interesting little coincidence there, but most of her other credits are live action, and a lot of the actors around this are live action actors.
Yeah, because this is
most notably.
I'm sorry, you were gonna say.
I was going to say Riko Kikuchi, who is Oscar-nominated actress. You know her from Pacific Rim. Most people do.
Nope.
But she's been in a lot of other things. And she is incredibly talented. And I would say the success of the movie is mostly around her performance. And then we have the lead is voiced by Ryo Kase, who is also a live-action actor, most notably in Letters from Iwo Jima, the Clint Eastwood movie that was actually filmed in Japanese, and surprisingly as hell, it's a great movie. I just haven't watched it in a decade. It's kind of one of those movies you only watch once. And then we have, in a minor supporting role, is Chiaki Kuriyama, who you will know has the psycho crazy bonkers lady from Battle Royale and Gogo Yubari from Kill Bill. So there's a lot of well-known cast, and it's a lot of voice actors who do live action on the side, or are mostly live action people, which makes it fit because this feels more like a movie than it does like an anime. I mean, obviously they're anime movies, but there's a distinct feel between the two, and I think the feel they are going for is the reason it doesn't get much of attention, because they sold it as Top Gun anime, and the English trailer for this sold the action, which is really good, although you soon learn it's relatively pointless for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into that once we talk about the story. But Sony sold all of the action, and that is strictly 10% of the movie, and the rest of the movie is like a 60s European new wave film.
Yeah, it's like selling. It's like selling Breathless as an action movie. Yes, Breathless has a burglary in it, and somebody ends up dead at the end of Breathless. Spoilers. But Breathless is not an action movie, and this is an action movie in the sort of the same vein that something like, as you said, any French new wave film is an action movie.
Yeah. I did. If you want a really film language barrier, describe it. It is blow up if they tried to sell it as blowout, which is
just in a nutshell.
Blow up. Yeah, but that needs like 10 minutes of explanation. The best I can do is Blow Up was a movie by Michelangelo Antonioni from the 60s, and it's very European, and it's about a guy who gets obsessed that he captured a picture that has a murder, and it's a lot of him processing the picture. It's a lot of him looking at the picture. It's a lot of obsessing, and it's a lot of internalized stuff, and there's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of excitement in it. And then you go to Blowout, which is Brian De Palma's like late 70s, early 80s take on it, which is John Travolta is a porn movie audio person who has to capture audio for sound effects and just background audio, and then he thinks he captured a murder, and the movie starts off with a pornography simulation with Ron Jeremy in it, and it's very huge government conspiracy, and John Lithgow is a crazy assassin, and while you can tell they are both the same inspiration, they are definitely not the same movie.
No.
So they sold that this one was the more... They sold it with trailers that make it look like the more Americanized, when it's much more of a European new wave, very internalized, very you have to pick up context clues and you have to make your own interpretations about the plot, because this was based on a novel series, and there is another adaptation of it called Skycrawler Innocent Aces, which is a Wii game made by the Namco, which they take another novel from it, and they have two different approaches. Like, this is the, very art film version of it, and the video game Innocent Aces, which I played through all the way, is the very much the anime version of it, like a very standard issue, and this goes for how they handle the characters and how they handle the lore and stuff like that. So.
Because
Anyway.
it's fair to say this does not, although it is obviously an anime film, it does not feel like, in terms of not only the way that sort of the film is, because obviously the film has a far more naturalistic audio approach to acting in this compared to basically any anime movie from the last, since anime was like a major thing. The way a lot of the sequences are shot is very sort of... It's almost like there are some sequences in this that are shot very similar to how Roger Deakins, obviously the esteemed photographer, does. The sort of... It will hold on characters, And okay, I know anime uses this as a shortcut, but it is being used here. This film, because this film is, as you said, $3 million. There's no budget being saved by reduced animation. It is being used here for stylistic rather than money saving effect. It's very
because the CG hasn't aged as well as it probably should, but it was top of the line CG at the time, and everything is very elegant, everything is very detailed, so it's not a case of where they have a lot of quiet moments and there's a lot of dialogue where you can't have the person speaking because they're trying to save money. It is because they are trying to create a particular mood. They're trying to create... They have characters who are very internalized. Like, all of their conflict is within themselves, and it only comes out at a major points in the story, or major points of frustration, which we will get into with the character of Kusanagi, who is a mostly internalized character for at least 3/4 of the movie until she can't hold it in anymore. And we have another Oshii movie where one of the main characters is named Kusanagi.
Yeah.
So we should probably get into the plot.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to do the plot, and then because the plot of this is
the thing is, you can spoil a lot of the movie. In fact, the back of the box spoils 3/4 of the movie by just describing the plot enough to make it interesting. Which is no fault of their own, but it's just the movie doesn't tell you a lot about what's going on and about why people are fighting, and you have to kind of pick it up through the dialogue as how people are discuss things and how things are set. So this is unlike the novel, which takes place in Japan. This is set in a fictional European area where the main character is Yuichi, who is a children, and the movie doesn't make it exactly clear what children are, but they were apparently formed in an accidental. They were trying to make one thing, and then they suddenly make human clones who do not grow old. And what they are used for is they are apparently used for in this war between two corporations, which is Rostock and Lautern. And
yes, it's good pronunciation.
Yeah. So the main character is Yuichi, who is the new pilot who has flown into Rostock to replace a pirate named Jinro, which is another film Oshii was involved with. So Jinro died, and he is taking the place. And right when he gets there, there are a lot of weird things, like when he goes there, he has to give the ship he flew in there back, and he's a pilot. This is mostly air battles, so they use there's a lot of airplanes and a lot of stuff like that. But so he flies in his airplane, and then they're like, you're going to have to get this back, and the company representative will send it back because this is the plane you are flying. And this was Jinro's, and it's like, oh, if Jinro is a pilot, shouldn't he have died in the air? And nobody's really talking about it. He does, and he meets a pilot or a mechanic named Mama who kind of just goes through the bare minimum without talking to him about anything. And she just kind of has this dead-eyed, 1,000-yard stare. And then during this, the officer in command of the outpost is Kusanagi, who is carefully watching him and watching him through windows. And she's like, sees him from a balcony and stuff, but doesn't talk to him until absolutely necessary. And when he goes up to her office to like, okay, I am Yuichi, I am the new pilot here, and he's like, welcome. And so Kusanagi is very guarded, and she is very quiet. And there's okay, she seems a little cold. And then he meets all of his pilots, most notably Naofumi, who is his co-pilot, and they're the partners who go out on the most sorties together. And he's kind of hedonistic. He goes out, he drinks, he gets prostitutes and all of that, and he's the one who kind of talks to Yuichi about what things are going on. Like he kind of I hear Kusanagi was real close with Jinro, and I hear she has a sister, and the sister comes on base, and it's like, I hear that's not her sister, that's actually her daughter. So there's a lot of mysteries with Kusanagi, and it's mainly Yuichi just kind of going through his day-to-day routines with the missions and the sorties, and then going along with trying to sort out what is exactly going on at this place. Because everybody's quiet. When they go to, there's a diner just outside. The main people don't really talk to them. I mean, the staff is very nice to them, but they have kind of treat them very quietly, and they only talk to them when they really need to. So there's stuff going on underneath that we don't know quite yet. And it's very hard to describe the plot, because that's kind of it. That's kind of this movie. It's a very performance driven. It is very mood driven, and it's a lot of stuff. if you pick up on the side, like they will have radio broadcasts, or at one point, Yuichi has to give a tour of the facility, and how you see his expressions and how he talks to them and how they revere them, and it's, you have to take a lot of context into and reactions, and you have to put your own work into it, which is, you know, I love it. A lot of people who just love lore and love like world building, they probably will not like this movie, because they don't just set you aside and here's what the war is about. Here are what the children exactly are, and here's, you know, exactly why everything is happening the way it is. It's it leaves you to draw your own conclusions about what this movie is about, and that's what I love about it. But you know, that obviously doesn't get traction with a wider audience.
Yeah, the film I actually felt particularly, it reminded me of, and this is going back to things like French New Wave and sort of, to a latter extent, sort of things like Soviet cinema, is it sort of reminded me quite a lot of, in terms of particularly the style and the sort of the very long take and the very sort of, you know, this is a film essentially about a group of characters interacting. It just reminded me a lot of Tarkovsky. I don't know if you particularly got that vibe off it as well, but it's got that very, not only has it got that very painterly style that Tarkovsky has, you know, these very, in some cases, very long, very, always very precise shots where it focuses on a character, but also sort of in that sort of very feeling and very emotively driven sort of sense of the cinematic.
Tarkovsky, maybe from the cinematography and how some of the shots are held, but clearly some of the pacing was a little, I mean, I wouldn't say hurried, because this is not a hurried film. No. It is a 2-hour movie, and it kind of feels like 2.5. Some people can take that as an insult, but it's a very, I wouldn't say, but it's not at the pace where it's just like, there are shots that go on for, you know, 3 or 4 minutes in Tarkovsky. You're not going to get that here.
No.
Like, I just watched Stalker, and it doesn't feel like it is paced like one, but it definitely has the feel. It doesn't have the usual inspirations of anime. It has more, you know, European art film.
Yeah, it definitely has more. It definitely has, and I'm actually struggling to think of another anime film that has such, with the exception of possibly something else that Oshii did. So, you know, Ghost in the Shell is still very much of Japan. It is, as the execrable Scarlett Johansson film showed us, it is a work sort of that you need to understand from a Japanese context. But it's
for Oshii, you kind of have to go back to Angel's Egg.
Yeah, or any anime film.
With it, from the 80s, where it's just like, we don't care if this doesn't make money. We're just gonna throw a bunch of money at it because hey, we're made of money.
Here, Yoshitaka Amano, come draw for us.
Yeah.
But no, it's
so.
I'm struggling to think of another anime film to compare this to. The only thing that it does remind me of, and it's more in that sort of the sense of pacing and I suppose some of the visual impacts, is Shinkai, but Shinkai is still very much an anime director rather than, you know, what this is, which is basically a film that just happens to be animated in this style. 'Cause
the 5 centimeters per second would probably be the closest thing.
Yeah.
But that just that would be the most thing where it's just like, it's very long takes, although the cuts in 5 centimeters per second were a lot quicker, because it was a lot of Shinkai was especially the cherry blossoms, the first segment of 5 centimeters per second, was it was showing a lot of the life the two people were missing by writing letters for each other. So it was a lot of what was happening around them rather than what was happening to them until they get to the subway part, which. But we're talking about other movies, so we should probably get on track from this one.
Absolutely.
So, what is very good about this is it is very performance-based, and which is extremely difficult because they are voice performances.
Yeah.
Obviously, the animation does a lot of work. There are a lot of, I want to say, props that are used to give information, and the animators do a very good job at like covering their expressions, but also the voice actors are extremely good. Like Rinko Kikuchi got an Oscar nomination for a reason. Like the entire movie is based around this performance of Kusanagi as this officer who has been a Kildren, who has lived through most things that these people will never live through. She knows like way more than any of the people around her are supposed to know, and she has gone through a wide variety of tragedy, and especially personal, and we'll get to that in the spoiler section, because if we have to talk about it, all of it, we have to kind of talk about it in spoiler sense.
Yeah, because like, this is, as I said, it's not so much that this film is very bare bones, but it's like basically it is a film that sort of runs on. It is character driven. There is a plot, but the plot is so enmeshed with these characters and sort of the arcs that they all go on, particularly the sort of the main two characters, that it's sort of you can't talk about this film without sort of looking at the end trajectories of these. What I will say, and what I think particularly adds to the quality of this film, is obviously Tetsuya Nishiko's character design, which is, although it is quite a slightly more simplistic style than sort of some other styles. Nishiko, by the way, is pretty much Oshii's right-hand guy in terms of character design, so he's done a lot of his stuff from Jinro onwards, which is sort of obviously they clearly work together well as a team. But he's particularly with the sort of the main characters, they're all fairly easily identifiable, even at a distance, and even obviously when wearing flight gear. They're not complex designs, but they are very aesthetically unique, and again it's sort of interesting to see how different the style of these characters are, and how that fits into this more sort of naturalistic visual and obviously cinematic style.
And a lot of them like hold a lot of their emotions inside, but you can tell who they are, and you can tell how they're feeling, even though a lot of them wear the same jumpsuits a lot of the movie. I mean, there is supporting characters who are prostitutes who are outside of it, and Fuko, and I forget the other one, but she definitely, and you can definitely tell who is where and who's talking, and you can tell how they're feeling or what their emotions are, even if a lot of it is internalized. And there is a lot of there are a lot of props, there are a lot of little things that pass along information, or there are a lot of shots that hold. This might be a little bit from the 60s new wave influence, because there are a lot of shots that hold, like want you to tell this is a big revelation with, and that was the 60s way of doing it, is holding on a shot and then getting, and there are a lot of things like that where like when Yuichi is talking to Kusanagi for the first time, and he's with his partner Naofumi, and then they're getting into the questions of, what happened to Jinro and why did I need to fly here only to give the plane back and stuff like that. And then you see now Fumi kind of duck out of the conversation, like this is nuts. Like he kind of knows the answers to the question, but he doesn't want to deal with them because now Fumi, he is kind of a person who he seems to have lived through most of this, and he certainly lives through all of the film, but he seems to have experienced some of the same things Kusanagi does, but how he does it is through he drinks, he parties, he visits the high-class prostitutes that apparently are given to these pilots, and he does a lot of the hedonistic stuff, and that's how he deals with it, and a lot of that is dealt with without saying, oh, this is now Fumi. He's kind of a party animal. They introduce him, he is kind of tapping on the window on the ground floor, even though the door is 3 feet apart, like he had an all-nighter and he just drank all night. And that's they do a lot of that with establishing character. And Kusanagi they show her as a very guarded person, and they have a lot of metaphorical guards or things that, like, she has a giant music box. I think they're called organs or something like that. It's like the Italian word for organ, but they're music box, but it's a giant thing, and it's silent. So, but when she starts to open up, like it starts playing the music, which is like a metaphor that, oh, she's starting to open up. And when the movie starts, she is wearing glasses, which is another guard, and as she goes through the movie, as she starts to open up to Yuichi, she takes her glasses off, and she does it once at first because she's in like a seriously frustrated moment where I think it's when one of the plane crashes in the field, and she goes out and it's just surrounded by villagers, and she has a disdain for civilians. And so suddenly she just can't take it anymore. She takes off her glasses and starts yelling at them. And that's how we figure out things, is you pick up little clues, you pick up little symbolism and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say it's subtle, because it certainly follows the 1960s version of unsubtle, which is different from what ours is. Yeah. Ours is there's a crash in the score, or the score gets dramatically higher, or it tells you what to think, or something like that. And in the 60s, it was kind of, you had things that were obvious metaphors, or you had, holds on shots and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it's a subtle movie. I would just say has a different language than what we're used to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I did do a cinema blog, so it's really interesting to sort of look at this film from a cinematic point of view, because there is a hell of a lot of, show don't tell. This film is pretty much show don't tell. There is like, not to say that the dialogue is sparse, but a lot of the dialogue is sort of almost incidental. You'll have things in the background, and obviously a lot of them are in English, so it's really interesting from that point of view to go how much of it, obviously because this film is subtitled, but how much of this would actually make sense to a Japanese audience. And sort of like, there's almost layers of sort of, this film is very European. This is an interesting question. Obviously, how does the performance in the dub? Because I only watched obviously the subbed version. What is the dub performance like in comparison? Because obviously this is a film that runs on vocal performances. So
I have not. Honestly, I have watched this movie about 7 or 8 times. I have never watched the dub, just because I think the performances here are essential. Because otherwise, I don't think it holds the movie together. I think it becomes the movie like the people who don't like it really see it as, which is kind of a dull, plotting movie that's trying to be artistic. But these performances are essential for the movie to work because this movie is built on it, and I have not felt the need. And I'm not a sub-dub snob.
No.
There's plenty of dubs I enjoy, but I feel like for this one, I really need Rinko Kikuchi's performance here because it's
a hell of a performance.
Really powerful. It's very powerful considering it is not like an actor's performance piece. It is a lot of, it's a lot of speaking, and it's a lot of assuming things from how she's talking and how she's, and getting how she, because she is a very moody person, but keeps it very internalized. So you kind of have to pick up on her details about, what she is thinking right now. Mm-hmm. Although, sometimes her expressions betray her because she's a person who gets very frustrated, very desperate, very easy, and that comes out at very bad times, and it comes out as the movie goes along.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I would agree with you there. It's like, obviously in the wake of Parasite, obviously winning, Best Picture, being one of the first, films in non-English to win Best Picture, it's like going, well, do you want to watch Parasite dubbed? No, because you lose the nuances of the language and the performance, and I feel like we almost have to approach the Skycrawlers more from the position of the rules and the ideas that we would approach a live action film almost. Would you agree? Sort of, it feels more like a live action film that just happens to be animated in this particular style. I mean, this would probably hold up fairly well, translated back into live action without much issue.
Yeah. Let's see here. I mean, it did go to a lot of film festivals. A lot of its wins were like best animated film, which is probably because it was like the only big one there. But it did win some things like best original soundtrack, Kenji Kawai, which is probably at one of the film festivals, which is pretty important. Kenji Kawai's music, which we haven't mentioned yet, is also really good. I think it's one of its best. If you know Kenji Kawai, he did Eden of the East, Ghost in the Shell movies, some Gundam, but everybody's done Gundam. But he has a very distinct sound where this is who's doing it. Mm-hmm. And this is no different, but it's it creates that mood of that quiet desperation, and the things that people do not speak to each other, but it doesn't overwhelm unless it is super high emotions or it is during the action sequences, which are really driving. And we should probably speak about those. The thing about the action sequences is that they are fantastic, but they are kind of pointless. As you find out through the plot of the movie, I suppose we can spoil this bit about it. We'll go minor first, but the two companies are paid essentially to war with each other, so humans do not have to. These are proxy wars where wars are treated as like baseball teams or something like that, and you're either a fan of one side and the other. So this is essentially show wars where they don't really damage anything. Like there are some clues hinted at early on where their base gets bombed, but all of the bombs miss. For some reason, they all hit the field aside. That doesn't affect any of the ways they can. And then there's the major centerpiece, which is supposed to be all these troops getting brought together to get this big operation. And then in the middle of it, they have bombers and they extend like they're going to drop their bombs, and then they don't, and then they say mission complete, go home. So they just go home after that, and you never hear if the mission was a success or what they were even doing. It's kind of a show war, and it's just like the score is how many people died here or how many people died here. And the big, and then they have the big star player who is the teacher.
Oh boy.
And yeah, the teacher is essentially all of these people who are pilots are cloned teenagers, and they all die fairly quick. And then they are replaced with other clone teenagers who are similar to them, but they have the same skill set, but they look different, and they have subtle differences to that. So what the companies do is when one of their pilots dies, they replace them with somebody who is exactly the same. So what the movie plays out is that Yuichi is a clone version of Jinro, who was lovers with Kusanagi, and she is trying to hold in, realizes this is not him, and this is just another clone, and it's going to be, but she can't hold in her feelings forever. So,
yeah.
So they they still, what they do is, he is the only person that can connect to her. She is very disconnected from everybody else. I mean, there are people who understand her plight, like Mama, the maintenance worker, who understands but kind of leaves Kusanagi to her own world. And then there are the other pilots who, like Naofumi, who is hedonistic, and they don't get along. Like, there's a scene where they're in Krakow, Poland, and they go bowling, and it kind of displays how much there's a disconnect between Naofumi and Kusanagi, even though they've kind of been the ones who have survived the longest. He just wants to play games and have fun and meet women, and all of this is just frivolous, and it's just like, it is taking away from, it is just making the children show ponies, and it's just, she kind of despises it a little bit, and like, another way to show how she feels is she bowls, and then she gets a kind of a split, and then she just intentionally bowls straight forward, doesn't try to hit any of the pins, and she doesn't want to play games. She is tired of games because their lives are essentially surrounded by games, just to satisfy these people so they can have their little wars, but none of their family has to die. They have to be the sacrifice for them. And you can kind of see how the pilot react when Yuichi has to be the tour guide for all of these people, and it's like, oh, we love what you're doing. It's like, thank you. I am just honorably doing my job. And then he has the most forced smile, even if he wasn't speaking like, broken English. You could tell he is like really not enjoying this. He doesn't like being around these people. So, and then there's what this all means, which is open-ended. Justin Savakis of Anime News Network wrote a review where it's totally about the anime industry and about how they just make the same story over and over. And I can see it. I don't agree with it. I kind of see it as life in general. I mean, you can definitely pull how we need war and how war is a constant because we need it like we need sporting competitions. And you can see that how with all the social distancing and we have no sports, people are just kind of going insane right now. So we kind of need that competition, and unfortunately that boils over into international conflict, and it's kind of a damning thing for humanity that we need it to go this far. I take it like that melancholy of we are trying to become better, but we can never, there's the... I've probably been going on for way too long about this, but it's there's the melancholy of life and how we are trying to overcome like the overwhelming like waves that crash against us that are world like there's the teacher, which is obviously a symbol for authority figures, and there is the nations around us and the people around us who are all kind of forcing everybody into this. And then there's all of these people are too young, and then they get forced. They don't understand what they're getting into, which kind of brings in the supporting character Midori. She is the one who is voiced by Chiaki Kuriyama, and Midori Mitsuya is kind of the ace of another squadron. And what they do with her is she is like the person who is trying to suddenly figuring out everything is wrong, and she has a very young person respond to it. It's like, why aren't you doing anything? Don't you realize that this is all just some stupid game? Isn't this wrong? Shouldn't we say something about it? And that is how she reacts to it, because she wasn't like rattled down by life. And Yuichi, I think, he has an understanding but understated reaction to it, where he gets what is going on, but he doesn't discuss it openly very often. He doesn't take it like we need to have a revolution or something like that. That is kind of Mitsuya, who is just understanding what she is dealing with, and she cannot deal with it because it's like when you get into college, you take psychology classes, and then you take writing classes, then you realize this is how the world works, and then it's like, I'm going to go out there, and it's like, do you know this? Do you know this? Oh my God, my eyes are open. And then it's just like, then you're talking to people in their 30s and 40s, and it's like,
wake up, sheeple. Wake up.
Yeah, she's kind of a wake up sheeple, but she's very decent about it.
Yeah.
She's just like, she is very, why aren't people doing anything about it? And she kind of unfortunately has to play against Naofumi, who is just kind of a clown who wants to go into his boozing and is playing around and all of that. That's how he escapes this thing, and Yuichi just kind of takes it as it comes. And then Kusanagi, who was probably Midori at some point, but has gone way past this. She has lived way past pretty much everybody except the adults who work in the facilities. Mm-hmm. And who is just kind of still disgusted. She is still bitter, but she takes it out on the system. Like, there's one point where after their facility is bombed and they weren't properly informed of it, that she goes at, okay, Yuichi, you need to be my wing person to make sure I don't go too far here, and drives him to like the head honcho's base, and it's like, I want to speak with your manager, or I want to speak to the person in charge. And she takes it out on all of the people who are making them do this, and who are to withhold information to make the game more exciting, to make all of this a more entertaining thing, so people have enjoyment and they don't need to go to war, but they're the pawns for it, and she doesn't fucking like it, and she will let them know at every opportunity. So
I mean, from my perspective,
it's all okay. Go ahead.
I agree with everything you've got, because it is sort of like, this is the thing about the film. It is so open-ended and so thick, but there is definitely an element of this film which is very much against, and it's quite subtle in comparison to some of the readings of this. It seems to be about this sort of gamification of war, the idea obviously of this rolling 24-hour sort of idea of, the sort of, I think the famous quote is sort of obviously of the rolling 24 hours of news, over particularly, I think, particularly starting with the first Gulf War and pretty much every major conflict onwards, that it's just like, this is the war has become like sport coverage. It's like, oh, this number of people have died on this side, this number of people have died on the other side. Here's our roving camera doing X, Y, Z. There's a great scene in the British comedy series, the Day to Day, which is obviously early 90s, where it sort of goes to this. The war is declared in one of the episodes, and it goes to basically this whole rolling 24-hour sort of gamification of war. And it obviously, I think, compared to some anime films that hit this particular nail much heavier on the head and go, war is wrong, and everyone's part of the system, sort of like, for example, I'm trying to think of what examples of them. There's a lot of anime films, particularly made in the last sort of 10-15 years, and obviously in the post-Iraq period, that sort of go, yeah, what's wrong, folks?
And then there's just a little before it, which was Gundam Wing, which is very like doughy-eyed in response to war, and it's like, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening. And then it ends with the movie where all the Gundams were destroyed and war was never a thing ever again. Which of course isn't the case, because they need to make more Gundam series. But
this series sort of captures that sort of that famous "war never changes" quote, sort of, because and it's sort of the way, obviously as we're about to sort of slide effortlessly into the spoiler section, is that this film starts and ends in the same conflict. Nothing has changed. We've had basically set piece battles mean nothing. It's all spectacle. It's all artifice. It means nothing. The loss of our characters, sort of friends and colleagues in this sort of this war game, means nothing. It's a surprisingly it's a surprisingly nihilistic approach. It's just nothing matters because it's all part of this grand charade to stop actual war.
And there is, like, I think they wanted to be like the main scene where everybody got the themes of the movie from it, where they're in Krakow, Poland, and Kusanagi is like, just decided to have enough bowling, and it's like, is there anything open? And there's just this fancy diner, and it has a very distinct background with, I think it's like, I don't know exactly what it is, and I need to investigate it further, but it seems like it's very much about the Holocaust, or very much about conflict there, with all of those people in costumes and stuff like that. And this is where she gives her big monologue about war and how humans need war after a few gallons of wine, and about how this is just this is just a part of them, and it will never leave, and we have to pay their price for it. And it's a very damning monologue against humanity and stuff like that. And it's surprisingly quiet for Kusanagi is basically the personification of quiet desperation, which is why I think the scene doesn't get remembered so much. I like all of the little things in it. I think it's like when she's still kind of out on a date with Yuichi, even though she's like drunk, she is in a terrible mood, and she has all of these thoughts about how, this is never ending, but she still goes to the bathroom and she's like cleaning herself off because she's like had too much to drink and she's in a bad mood. And then there's just this Polish lady who's doing her lipstick, and she just looks at it for a second. It's like, can I help you? And then she comes out of the bathroom with the lipstick on. It's like, even though all of this is going on, she is still on a date with Yuichi and still wants to look nice, and that is just like, that is a really nice character moment, that she is still a human being and she is still, you know, kind of in love with this person, even though this probably isn't even the second rendition of the person she's in love with. So it's like I said, it handles a lot of its themes in the background, and it doesn't overtly say it. Like I said, it's a very writer's movie where they tell you to show, don't tell, and where they say don't, like, write script like, this means this. This is the symbolism for this. Like how there's the movie Finding Forrester where they have a writing competition at the end, and like he realized the flower was the person he had missed for so long, and this represented his loneliness, and that was a representation of like a writer who, you know, did a good job and it might be successful, but it's not really a great piece of writing. And then followed up by, you know, the main character from Finding Forrester blowing them away with like this wonderfully lyrical thing. So this is like, you know, this is really good writing that doesn't get appreciated. And I like that. And there are a lot of small things, like there's a subtle joke in here I don't think scans very well, where at the beginning when Yuichi first meets Kusanagi, he quotes Albert Camus, like it's a piece of dialogue from Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, where instead of, you know, saying what he feels or saying the regular dialogue, he's just quoting Camus.
Camus.
Or is it Camus?
Camus.
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 Albert Camus. I am very sorry. I have only seen that name in print. It is one of those names. And then she says, "Oh, you've read Camus, huh?" And then she just brushes it aside like it's nothing. And I think that was like the screenwriter. She was making a joke about Oshii's dialogue. And then the movie just goes on with there like nothing happened. And it's very small things like that, and it's like that's how they teach you to write, but unfortunately that's not how you can write sometimes. Like I was trained in both like English writing and then newspaper writing, where you have to write on a 6th grade level and you have to get the important points away right away, and you can't just kind of hide what the story is about. It's called burying the lead, and you can't do that in journalism.
Those two things are not compatible. You can't sort of write a novel in the same way you can.
Yeah.
You probably can, and probably there are novels that are written in that style, but
yeah,
they're called airport novels, and they're not very good most of the time.
Yeah, I mean they can be successful. They're definitely like light novels work like that, where they tell you exactly what the character is in a few set paragraphs, and then, you know, there's dialogues that's saying, "Oh, in this world I have transported to," and it's just like, "I am the king," and it's written like that, where it's very obvious and it's very on the nose, and you can be successful at that. And there's good ones. In fact, if you don't like this type of movie, there's another movie that's very similar to it that you would really enjoy. It's called The Princess and the Pilot, and it is weirdly takes the plot of Spaceballs, even though it's kind of a Pacific island hopping air combat movie, but it is everything like standard and successful, but is really good about it, and it has a lot of heart. So if you want, you know, an entertaining movie, I wouldn't say it's fun because it's definitely falls into the dramatic side of things, but it is a very enjoyable kind of popcorn movie with the same kinds of planes. Like they use the same kind of planes. Like I'm not very into aircrafts and what they exactly are. I mean, I only know their names like from the series, like the J2s and the Skyleys. I mean, I know what they are, and I know that from playing the Innocent Aces game. And it's just like, oh, when do I get to pilot Skyleys? They're the best when there's like unlocked when you beat the game. I'm like, okay, screw you.
Yeah, I mean, I will say
although the game is really good. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and also the planes, although the CGI is a little bit dated, as we've said before, the planes themselves are beautifully rendered. They do look very, very, quite the part, and even though they're sort of like really quite an interesting sort of design of plane, apart from obviously teacher's plane, which is more in the, it looks like is it a Mitsubishi Zero? It looks like a Zero. Was it another type of thing?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's called a Skyly, I believe, in this series, but it is a very fast, very, maneuverable plane, which is what the teacher does. Like, his big thing is doing these impossible moves that that absolutely wrecks all of these young pilots who, even though they have the experience of their previous clones, they don't have, like, the experience to handle the teacher, who is actually an adult who has done this for decades. Yeah. And in fact, in Innocent Aces, you are teacher, and there's a subplot in both of these about how some of the pilots traded corporations. Like in Innocent Aces, Kusanagi is the one who goes to Law Turn, and you are the teacher, you have to kill Kusanagi. That is the plot of Innocent Aces. But here, teacher is the supporting character who we never see, and she is the one who went to the other side, and Kusanagi apparently knew him. So it is just this cycle of war soap opera that has been going on forever, and the game and the movie both take two different approaches, where one is this, simple anime plot that deals with it in the standard way, and this is like the more introverted, thoughtful, like, this is really fucked up kind of approach. Anyway, I think we are past the hour mark.
Just gone past the hour mark.
Yeah. So, and it feels like we haven't talked a lot, because it's like there are a lot of floating elements, like Fuko, who is the prostitute that Yuichi has the first day he's there, and she is kind of a, she's there. She's kind of a deep introverted character, and obviously she has seen, this is not the first time it happens, because there's a story relayed where Jinro visited a prostitute, and Kusanagi, not realizing, and she was really too young to understand it, like, just goes in and has an hour conversation with Jinro in her room while she's just out there smoking a cigarette. And this is kind of, a past life thing, so she is kind of experienced with it, but they kind of have a more her and her partner, I forget her partner's name, who's now Fumi, but she is very extroverted and very much like, yoo-hoo, now Fumi, we're here. And Kusanagi really doesn't like her either, but so I mean, there are all these elements, and it kind of feels like they're separate and from everything, but they all work together very well to create this mood and this attitude. And I think it's a really terrific, understated movie, although I do get why it's maybe too anime for the art house crowd, or it just has that stigma of being a Japanese animated movie, so there's some people who stay away from it. Like I used to run a film group that ran like foreign, independent, and cult films, and we would have like an anime week every year. And the people who would be our regulars would like walk out 5 minutes into like say X 1999 or like Ninja Scroll. We had like 1/3 of the people walked out of Ninja Scroll, and I'm surprised 1/3 of the people didn't walk out of X, but we'll get to that thing eventually, I'm sure. But but on the other end, it is definitely not anime by anime rules. Like, there is certainly a style. I mean, there are a variety of genres and you know all sorts of approaches to animate, but it definitely has a certain style that comes with the animation, and um, performers perform their roles in a very specific way, and you know there are uh, prototypes for characters, and then they kind of just fo- follow that to the most part, which I get why Justin Sudeikis would say it's how Oshii views anime and why this is so different from anime. But but yeah, this is definitely not an anime for people who like enjoy the things that hit on the mainstream anime like Dragon Ball Z or you know, I mean
Yeah.
you can enjoy it, but it's just not if that's what you like and only what you like. Um, it's not going to have much for you because it's a very different style.
Hmm. I'd say honestly, this has probably more to do with something like what was it? Scanner Darkly. It is a film that happens to be in animation because through animation they can capture things that are or do things with an animated or semi-animated medium rather than obviously a live action film. I mean, as I said, there's no reason this film can't work in live action. It just chooses not to be.
Yeah. And also, I'm guessing the budget would be significantly higher given
yeah.
how much the planes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would look as good because they would have to use CGI and Japanese CGI. If they want to stylize it and they want to make it the movie stylized, it's good for that. But if you want to make CGI things look realistic next to people and stuff, Japanese live action CGI kind of has some growing to do for that.
Yeah, I've seen enough Kamen Rider and Super Sentai to tell you exactly why. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting better. I mean, Shin Godzilla, I think, was mostly CGI, or was a CGI augmented maquette, which is like really damn good. But sort of even so, not but like most television CGI is sort of somewhere in the sort of the mid to late 80s, early 90s, I would say. So sort of.
And if anything doesn't work, you can just fall back on it's Godzilla. Part of it has to look kind of fake because that's kind of the tradition. Even though,
Which you can't do
obviously,
with planes.
Eno is trying. Yeah, which you can't. It either looks good or it doesn't. There's no in between on aerial battles. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, we try not to take up too much of your time, so we should probably wrap it up. There's a lot I can talk about. There's a lot to go into, and it's a very heady picture, and there's a lot of little elements, and like, ooh, what does this mean? And and it doesn't really feel like I talked about the story very much, and there's no, which is fine because there's like the first 10 minutes of story, and then it kind of goes on for a little bit with the characters, and then there's like the last 10 minutes of the story, which is when all of the characters just like can't take it anymore. So and then there's just in between, which is stuff happens, but it kind of more ties to the character, and if you try to make the main plot out of it, you kind of realize how pointless the main plot is, which is it makes it sound like the movie is pointless. It's not. It's just like the things in the movie that are supposed to be, or what normally would be, the most important parts don't mean anything, and that's another reason probably why it doesn't translate to mainstream very well, because this movie was pointless. I mean, the things don't mean anything. It's like it does mean things, but what you think is the most meaningful parts aren't, and they're just switching it around, and it's just like it can be hard to get your head around that if what you're used to is the other stuff.
Yeah. Despite people having watched Seinfeld for decades.
Different kind of nothing.
Yeah. less important kind of nothing. So, what should we say? What was your general? I mean, I really enjoyed this. This is the first time I've seen this. I probably will get it on DVD at some point. I would be, yeah, I would definitely rewatch this at some point because it is. It's one of those films that sort of, you've got to be in the right mood to watch. I think though it is very much, a particular mood, and sort of being stuck inside where all the days are sort of slowly turning into one. It is kind of that mood. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, the movie came to me at the right time because I was starting work, full-time work, and I worked mornings, so I didn't really have much human contact, and my sleep schedule was really bad. So I was kind of in like this mood of melancholy where everything was constantly just repeating, and nothing was really good, nothing was really bad, and I was just going to work and then doing whatever, and then sometimes you go to the sports bar and watch a football game or something like that, and it was just like I was in that kind of melancholy, and that is exactly the melancholy I like in films. Strangely enough, I don't like super happy movies that are to forget your troubles, because I'm ADHD. I can't forget shit unless it's what I said 5 seconds ago. But I don't like super depressing. I do not like things like Requiem for a Dream that just hammer that everything is terrible, everything is horrible, and the horrors of all of this are the most worst thing in the world. But this is it is a melancholy movie, but it's my kind of melancholy movie that understands, yes, there are terrible things that happen, and yes, there are tragedies in life, but the most horrible depression we get is the stuff that lingers with us, and it understands that. It's like having coffee with a friend who understands you, is the best way I can put it. And it struck a chord with me that it probably is not going to strike a chord with most people. I mean, I've shown it to some art house people. I have the cool aunt who is really into independent films, so we've watched it. I am her anime filter. So I get her stuff like Kino's Journey and Hibine Renmei, and I send that stuff to her, and she absolutely loves it. But she has to make sure she gets it from me. So this is kind of it is a melancholy kind of art house. Do not let the trailer which is all the action, fool you. Even though apparently the first promotional trailer was done by Hideki Anno, and obviously he wanted to emphasize all the military stuff because that's what he does. If Shirobako is to believe, he has a giant model of a submarine in his house.
Yeah, it sounds like an Anno sort of thing.
Yes, I'll get to you in a second. So, but it is not about that. It is not. You said the first 10 minutes it came off like Top Gun the animated, and it's not. Yeah, it is a very moody, very thoughtful, very 60s cinema style film without the 60s color. Like even in the most downbeat introverted 60s film, there was always they would have a swingers party, and there would be women in mod outfits dancing around and they would just have it in the background as mood. But this doesn't have that, so it's just it's a lot of mood, it's a lot of stuff, and it's a very excellent looking. It is one of Kenji Kawai's best scores. It is all around a pristine piece. It's just you've got to be in the mood for it, and you've got to know what you're in for.
Absolutely. If you do want to watch Top Gun the anime, by the way, may I recommend the 6-part OVA, ironically by Hideki Anno, Gunbuster, which is pretty much Top Gun the anime, but with giant robots, and it's fucking awesome.
I still need to see that.
Yes. So
I've gotten everything that was supposed to be, but not... But Area 88, which came before Top Gun, so the dogfighting is really iffy, but And then they tried to sell Macross Plus as Top Gun the anime, and no. But yeah, I haven't watched Gunbuster yet.
I'd definitely recommend it, but that's for another episode. So, what are we doing next time? Because obviously it's a change of format next time. Next week we're actually talking. Next time we're actually talking about. Well, we're doing another thing. We're not doing anime next time. We're doing music. What are we doing next time?
Yeah. It is your turn to do the music.
It is my turn to choose the music, and I have gone for a 1995 album, which is a debut album by the American band Weezer. We are recording Weezer's 1995 self-titled album, also known as Blue.
And I have heard things. I have never been a Weezer fan, but you hear things about the Blue album.
It is Blue. Until next time.
Dabba-doo, dabba-da. Bye-bye.
Bye.